Hey guys, my name is Joe Fritchman, and this is my informational speech. My informational speech is entitled History of Seattle. So, when you're abroad or out of town and you're asked, where do you live? How do you answer? I assume most of you answer with simply Seattle. But how much do you know about the city that you call home? How many people who live in this area actually know about the rich history that has happened on the same streets that they walk on every day? My purpose for this speech is to bring some perspective for our history and to honor those who came before us, started with nothing, and built a beautiful city that I'm proud to call home. First, I'm going to touch on the founders of Seattle. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the earliest conflicts in the area. And finally, I'm going to talk about the rise of the city. Seattle was founded by members of the Denny Party, most of whom arrived at Alki Beach on November 13th of 1851. And then in April of 1852, they relocated to the eastern shore of Elliott Bay. With the filing of the first plats on May 23rd, 1853, the town of Seattle became official. However, some historians have found that evidence to contradict the accurate accounts. Bill Spiegel, whose book I'm referencing, Doc Maynard, The Man Who Invented Seattle, claims that by the late 19th century, the Denny family had held many of the local positions of power and influence and may have claimed the historical founding when it was actually a man named David Maynard who was the key figure in establishing Seattle's township. Despite the controversy, the two parties definitely occupied what we now know as the greater metropolitan area, with the Denny party in the north of Yesler area and the Maynard family in present-day Pioneer Square. In Paul Tailbart's book, The Lake People of Seward Park, A History of Seward Park, the first name for the area was the Duwamps, after the Duwamish people, but David Maynard convinced the city leaders to name it Seattle after his friend, the chief of the Duwamish people, Chief Seattle. With the township expanding and the rise in population began to infringe on the native lands, this led to many altercations between the settlers and the natives. Bill Spiegel writes in Sons of Prophets that the general consensus of the community was that killing an Indian was a matter no graver of consequence than shooting a cougar or a bear. By 1854, the Washington Territory Governor Isaac Stevens proposed the Treaty of Medicine Creek, which essentially relocated native tribes to rocky coastal fishing reservations away from their native vast prime farmlands. The treaty was signed by the chiefs of the Nisqually, the Puyallup, and the Steilacoom, who did not represent all of the tribes affected by the displacement. If you live here today, you might not know that the federal government was involved in what is now called the Puget Sound War against local native tribes. Between 1855 and 1856, many armed conflicts, including what's called the Battle in Seattle, claimed the lives of settlers and native Indians, concluding with the trial and hanging death of Chief Leschi of the Nisqually tribe. The thing that really built Seattle was the timber industry. Logging put Seattle on the map as the main supplier for timber used to build some of the major cities on the West Coast. It was in perfect placement to mill and ship logs down to construct San Francisco during its huge gold rush and the big city's boom. And in turn, it generated a ton of income for Seattle and the future. There's so much wonderful material about this subject that I honestly got lost in the information. But I hope you take away what is at least a fraction of the rich history that this area has to offer, from the founders to the wars and the constant growth that we continue to see today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful quarter.